Happy New Year. Good morning and welcome to the Orange County School Board's work session, which has been scheduled for today, Tuesday, January 9th, 2024, for the purpose of discussing the capital program update. The public will not have an opportunity to participate in this work session to provide public comment because this is not a regularly scheduled school board meeting and no action will be taken. And there will be no pre-agenda period in which the public normally would address the school board on relevant topics that are related to the work of the board. For those of you who are here today with us this morning, welcome. Glad to have you here. Some board members are attending in person, and some of us are here present. I will take roll call in just a minute. I hope everybody in the audience is feeling well. Anybody who's tuned in will probably knows very quickly that we do not have very many members of our board here, and our superintendent is not here. Happy New Year, but it's starting out to be a little bit under the weather, I would say. I'm sure many of you know loved ones that are suffering from cold, flu, or other ailments, and our board members that aren't here with us, as well as the superintendent, are under weather as well. I want to remind the public that board members will not be engaging in outside electronic or digital communication during the meeting so that we can focus on the meeting itself, giving our attention to the matters immediately before us. Should you want to contact us, feel free to do so, but you will not hear back from us during the meeting. To my fellow board members and district staff, when speaking, please be sure your microphone is turned on and speak directly into it so our YouTube and Orange TV viewers can hear you clearly. And now we will begin. Well, let me first take a roll call, beginning with Vice Chair Gallo.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. Member Salamanca. Okay, I don't believe Member Salamanca is going to be able to join us this morning, but I wanted to check. Member Ferrant.
Here.
Member Gould.
Good morning.
Good morning. Member Felder.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Member Castor-Dental, who I don't believe is logging in with us right now, and Member Byrd.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, with that, we'll begin our meeting with a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Now for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Dr. Armbruster, I will turn the floor over to you.
Good morning, Chair Jacobs and board members. Thank you for this opportunity to share an update on our capital campaign projects that are a part of our 10-year plan as well as future needs. At this time, I will turn it over to Rory Salambini, Chief Facilities Officer.
Well, good morning, Chair Jacobs, board members, and staff. This morning, I'll provide a brief update on our capital program, which will highlight the impact of the impending expiration of the half-cent sales tax surtax. I'll begin the update with a review of the current environment relative to our capital program, followed by a review of the capital program funding status. Last May, we presented a $6 billion 10-year capital need. Since then, the board has adopted a budget that allocates funding to a portion of the need. My review will identify the funded and unfunded components and will highlight the impact of the impending sunset of the current sales tax surtax. I'll conclude with proposed next steps for a possible extension of the surtax. This slide from this year's budget presentation depicts the relative contribution of the various capital revenue sources, with the primary sources being the $1.5 million property tax depicted in orange and sales surtax in yellow. The dark blue depicts impact fee collections that support additional capacity. Collections from all sources so far this year are in line with projections. As shown here, collection of the sales surtax will end on December 31st, 2025 without a renewal or extension, with a corresponding reduction in revenue of almost 50% in the succeeding years. There's one additional point I'd like to highlight regarding revenue. The board may recall that we are currently sharing property tax proceeds with charter schools. As a result of legislation approved in last year's legislative session, We will similarly be required to share sales surtax proceeds from any future referendums approved by voters. In other words, even if the sales surtax were extended by the voters, our anticipated revenue would be less than we've received in the past, as a portion would be shared with charter schools. We shared these enrollment projections at the workshop in May. We have annotated this slide to compare current enrollment to last May's projection for this year. As shown, our current enrollment is approximately 2% lower than we projected and still has not reached last year's enrollment. We're currently completing our annual update, which we anticipate will forecast a slightly lower growth in enrollment than shown here, with little or no impact to our current projection of new school needs. As we also shared in May, construction costs have surged over the last few years. This slide depicts the increase in the average cost of a new elementary school over the past 5 years. Although not shown on this slide, we have seen similar increases in costs for all grade levels. On average, the new schools that we open this year will cost more than double what the district paid for similarly sized schools opened in 2019. Unfortunately, there is no evidence to suggest that the recent increase is temporary. Initial indications are that our new elementary schools opening in 2025 will cost approximately the same as our 2024 opening. This is consistent with our projections of more normal escalation going forward, but also supports the reality that higher costs are here to stay. More importantly, this escalation significantly exceeds general inflation. So although revenue is expected to increase because of general inflation's impact on sales tax and property values, the growth in construction costs currently exceeds increases in revenue by a significant amount. This shows our portable inventory history, and I'd like to highlight 2 points on this slide. First, our building program has been successful in reducing the number of portables on our campuses, achieving a 65% reduction in the number of portables over the past 18 years. Second, a significant number of portables remain throughout the district for which additional capital investment is needed. Before reviewing the funding status, I'd like to quickly remind the board of the elements of our capital program. We provide additional needed capacity through new relief schools and capacity enhancement projects that provide additional permanent classroom additions at campuses with long-term needs and no alternative for relief. Comprehensive needs is a broad category that includes the remaining 4 priorities from the list of 136, the 20 schools that were too new or recently renovated at the time the list of 136 was created to warrant inclusion on the list, which are denoted here as the pre-sales tax list, the renovation and remodeling requirements of facilities that are being repurposed for other needs, functional equity requirements for existing schools, additional comprehensive needs at schools where the previously completed project did not address all needs, and finally the schools that were renovated or built in the earlier mid-2000s that will reach 25 years of age during our planning period. Our program also accounts for system renewals that are accomplished via the capital renewal program and are required separate from a comprehensive renovation, the renovation needs of our ancillary facilities, and the refresh of student technology devices and technology infrastructure. This slide shows the overall status of the $6 billion capital requirement that we shared in May and assumes no extension of the sales surtax. Without the extension, approximately 55% of requirements are currently funded. The rest of my presentation will summarize the elements in both the funded and unfunded categories. I'll first review funded projects, followed by a summary of the unfunded requirements. Our budget includes funding for the 3 new schools scheduled to open in August. We have successfully overcome the post-pandemic supply chain challenges, and these projects are currently on schedule to complete this summer in advance of the next school year. As we previously noted, each school is the first iteration of a new prototype for its grade level. There are 10 additional schools in the approved capital improvement plan covering new school requirements through 2023. Of note, all new schools recommended by the district's Advanced Planning Committee are funded in the current budget. Capacity enhancement projects at 7 campuses are currently funded and in the design phase. These projects are currently projected for completion prior to the 2025-2026 school year. The number in brackets following each school name is the board member district in which the school resides. We will follow this convention whenever specific sites are listed. The classroom additions listed here will increase the permanent school capacity by approximately 1,600 students. The current budget also includes funding for the last 4 campuses included in the original list of 136, which are the 4 primary technical college campuses. Construction is now underway on 3 of the 4, with completion of these 3 occurring later this year. We recently finalized program requirements for OTC South, allowing design to proceed for what will be the last project on the original list of 136. At this campus, formerly known as Mid-Florida Tech, we anticipate completing a combination of replacement facilities and renovations by May of 2027. This is the first of 2 slides depicting progress on the comprehensive needs for the pre-sales tax list schools. There are a total of 20 schools in this category, and the comprehensive renovations at these schools are funded in the current budget. We recently commenced construction on the first 2 projects for this group, with 7 additional projects commencing construction in 2024. All projects are projected to be complete in 2027 in time for the 2027-2028 school year. We have currently identified a need and budgeted funds for additional capacity at 2 of these schools to be accomplished in conjunction with their comprehensive projects. Where existing facilities were replaced at a new location as a result of a project on the list of 136, there is an opportunity to repurpose the existing facility for other district needs. Except for the 3 shaded items, which I will discuss later, funding is included in our budgeted requirements to address the building system renewal requirements of these facilities. Note that for the Cherokee School, where we're planning to create an arts conservatory, budgeted funding provides for the facility renovation and restoration needs, but does not address the program requirements for which we're planning to solicit funding from our community partners. New or newly renovated facilities won't stay new forever. Recognizing this, the board has established and funded a capital renewal program utilizing proceeds of the sales surtax to preserve the efficient operation of school facilities. Unlike comprehensive renovations, which holistically address building and program requirements, the capital renewal program is limited to the renovation and replacement of individual building systems and equipment costing $50,000 or more, similar to the air conditioning unit replacement depicted on this slide. There were no capital renewal projects during the first 11 years of the sales tax program. In 2014, the capital renewal program began to ramp up, completing 285 projects at a cost of $358 million between FY14 and FY23. Currently, we have 58 active projects at 112 sites with a total budget of $392 million. Of note, this is approximately equal to the total expended the previous 10 years. This increase reflects growing needs as our inventory increases and as building systems and components reach the end of their useful life. As the capital renewal program is funded solely from the sales surtax, our budget only covers requirements through 2027, when we expect to exhaust available sales tax funds unless the surtax is extended. Other funded capital program elements are summarized on this slide. Funding provides for system renewals needs at ancillary sites, such as the cooling tower replacement currently underway for this building. We have included a new facility for our Northeast maintenance site, which currently operates from a leased facility for which the lease will not be extended past the current term. We are also providing funding for a refresh of student devices while sales tax funds are available. Now I'd like to summarize the unfunded portion of our $6 billion total requirement. As I noted previously, all recommended new schools and a portion of the recommended capacity enhancement needs are funded. This slide identifies other recommended capacity enhancement projects that were not able to be funded in the current budget. We have lined through the Timber Creek High School requirement as we are providing and have funded a classroom addition in conjunction with the funded comprehensive renovation at that school. This slide summarizes the unfunded comprehensive needs in the 10-year requirements that we identified last May. I previously highlighted a group of schools where the original sales tax list only addressed a portion of the needs, due to an approach in the 2000s that limited project expenditures to the estimates established at the time the list was developed. In some cases, the majority of funds were used to provide additional capacity without renovating the existing facility. In other cases, budgets were simply inadequate to address the full comprehensive needs, and project scopes were limited in lieu of budget adjustments. The second category is for facilities completed between 2002 and 2007 that will reach their 25th birthday in the 10-year window included in our forecast. 49 campuses were either built new, fully replaced, or received a comprehensive renovation. The amount shown here includes budget requirements for all projects completed through 2024, plus requirements for schools that received a comprehensive renovation through 2007. Not included, however, are requirements for renovation of new or replacement schools that opened in 2005 through 2007. The last item summarizes the unfunded repurposed school requirements, which I will briefly discuss on the next slide. The unfunded repurposed facilities include new uses at Clarcona and Pine Castle Elementary School and the existing OTC East campus currently being replaced. The tentative plans include an agribusiness magnet at the old Clarcona site, a pre-K center at the Pine Castle Elementary School site, for which we're currently reevaluating the need, and a modeling and simulation magnet at the current OTC East campus. None of these requirements are currently funded. This slide graphically compares the capital renewal need indicated by our facility condition assessment to the anticipated capital renewal funding under the current allocation formula of 2.4% of capital expenditures. As previously noted, capital renewal is funded solely by sales tax, and our ability to fund capital renewal as currently envisioned will cease once the current authorization ends. This will leave an estimated $892 million of unfunded capital renewal requirements through 2033. This slide summarizes the unfunded needs for ancillary facilities, which includes the comprehensive renovation requirements for these facilities that exceed the funded system renewals. Refresh of student digital devices beyond FY26 is also currently unfunded due to the expiration of the sales surtax authorization. This slide identifies other capital requests noted by board members, which, except for the shade structures for youth playgrounds, have not been included in either the funded or unfunded totals. The current budget included funding for the shade structures, and we're currently developing a project to accomplish the work. This concludes the summary of funded and unfunded program elements, the totals which are again summarized here. A couple of additional comments. As noted, the unfunded comprehensive needs do not reflect new or replacement schools reaching 25 years of age in the last 3 years of our plan. We anticipate adding these requirements in our next forecast. Second, each of these elements will require similar levels of funding in the years beyond our planning window. Additional new schools will be required, additional schools completed earlier this century, and projects from the original list of 136 will reach 25 years of age, and system renewal requirements funded by the capital renewal program will never end. Student devices will become obsolete and eventually fail. In short, the funding needs identified here will extend at similar levels in the years outside our current plan. This is my last slide and addresses the next step that are planned as we consider an extension of the current sales surtax. We plan to solicit school and community input via thought exchange that we intend to accomplish in the first 2 months of this year. We have initiated the annual process for updating our capital improvement plan and comprehensive and capital renewal needs, and will complete both those steps in April in support of budget development. We plan to present the updated needs at a board workshop scheduled for May 7th, which we are accomplishing in conjunction with the annual budget priorities session. A vote on the proposed resolution and ballot language is planned for the May 28th board meeting. Remaining deadlines related to the referendum are as shown on the slide. That concludes my presentation, and I'll turn the workshop back to the Deputy Superintendent for any additional comments.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Salabine, thank you so much for kind of the presentation. Great job on the presentation. Not thank you for the news. Really, really alarming information contained here. I have one simple question. Well, it might not be simple. One basic question. We've been fortunate enough to have this sales tax for quite some time. We've built a tremendous amount of schools compared to anybody else in the state. We've been able to maintain them and keep the capital renewal fund, but we lose that capital renewal funding moving forward if the sales tax isn't renewed. What I'm curious about, because I know we've had a lot of growth, but there are school districts across the state that have to have similar capital renewal needs. And most of our growth is paid for by impact fees, I believe.
Correct.
I don't know how many of the other districts have the extra sales tax. I know some of them have been more successful. And I'm curious because I think that the shortage of funding for capital isn't just an Orange County problem. It's got to be a statewide problem, which ought to compel the legislature to provide us more funding. Do we have any information about other districts across the state to understand what their financial condition is with regard to their facilities and the condition of their facilities? I know that's probably a tough thing to know, but I think it would be so helpful for us as we advocate for additional capital revenue.
So I have personal experience with one because I formerly worked for the Hillsborough County School District. I'm probably here because they did not have additional revenue, but they do now. And so they have successfully passed a sales tax surtax over there. And there are several other of the large districts have additional revenue. I'll have to do an inventory really to get back with you on what the total is, but I know there are several additional districts that have to get additional revenue. My personal experience, having worked in this business now in the state for 20 years, is that certainly since the Great Recession, when the property tax millage was reduced by 25%, it is not possible to sustain the types of facilities that we need, particularly in a competitive environment for both staff and students, and to provide the quality education that we need. Additional funding is required. And we've been fortunate so far that the voters in Orange County have supported us with that additional funding.
Yes, we have been, and I hope that continues. I just, this is not a sustainable way to fund and maintain schools across the state, to rely on the citizens each time to pass it. So I know we have Vice Chair Gallo on the line, and perhaps through the Florida School Board Association, perhaps they can help us gather, or maybe they already have it, that data rather than that falling on OCPS. But again, I think advocating statewide and making the case for how serious a risk we have to our schools without enough money to maintain the schools we have, let alone to, provide additional capacity. So, Vice Chair, if you're on the line, and if you have any comments, I'll call on you then, and then I'll go to Member Gould.
Hi, Chair. I don't have anything at this moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Member Gould.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Obviously, one of the points I wanted to make is the one that the chair brought up, but not only is it fragile when we have to go back to the community to do what is necessary for the investment in having quality facilities for the children of our county, it's also inequitable across the state for those who don't have the support or the financial abilities of our county to be able to support it. So we don't have equitable education facilities across the state. I know of many school systems that, deal with overflowing toilets and leaky pipes because they don't have capital renewal dollars. They don't have the money to build new facilities. And that is kind of a travesty. I wanted to ask a couple of questions that are not in your proposal. With the county's plan for 2050 and trying to maybe look at reducing costs of building if we were to go a little bit more vertical. I know in elementary school that's challenging, but for middle and high school, In the future, it may not be. We may need less land footprint. Do we have an analysis of following the county's drive for the 2050 plan with taking into account higher densities in our county, if that would give us any cost savings?
I think my initial, we haven't completed the analysis, I would say that, but my assessment is that it probably won't save money. It will probably cost us more. While there are land savings, there are additional costs associated with vertical construction. And as they try to compress things, you're looking to add costs with things like parking structures and other things that are more costly typically than the land. So I don't know that we would anticipate cost savings from the approach
Would
that
we
the county
be
is
required
pushing.
to have? I didn't realize that they were also required parking garages for us, but more in the school footprint, I thought was in the plan.
Well, it would only be required to the extent that they want to compress the amount of land that's made available for schools.
Right.
That's a way you can compress the land, by going up vertical with your parking as well.
Right.
And the savings from going vertical with your buildings, relative to the overall site amenities that you provide, the parking, the stacking, those sorts of things, are fairly small, and you have increased costs like the elevator cost and the other costs of the taller structures. So there are trade-offs, but I wouldn't anticipate that it's necessarily less costly.
Okay.
Again, to the extent that there's some discussion about sharing some of the amenities like playfields or other things, those can have some benefits to us if we're able to do that. But I don't think we see the 2050 plan requirements as something that is going to save us money. The other concern is that the discussion is that perhaps we're doing smaller schools. Smaller schools are more costly to build on a per student station basis, and they're more costly to operate. They tend to be money losers after a certain point of time. So those are concerns that we have, but we are working and engaged with the county as they work on that plan.
And I know this comes more into our operating budget, but it may be something that we want to look at, will not offset our wonderful community support of our half-penny sales tax, but the rental that we do get from our facilities, and are there any opportunities, I know there's slim, but to ever use facilities jointly with other entities, if we were to put offices on that space, as long as they, went through our security protocols. I just think we're going to have to think outside the box and be prepared if we don't have the reduction. And obviously there are still things that are unfunded that we really should be doing for our schools, that even with the support of the half-penny sales tax, which has been amazing. I will tell you that is the one thing that makes shock and awe as I have met school board members across the country, is what we've been able to do with our capital program and our capital renewal programs. It's just amazing, but it's not enough of an investment to do everything that we should and need to do for our students. So that may be something else in the future, if we could get that data too, that we might want to think about, is where would it be appropriate? I'm thinking with other municipalities or the county entities, could we share? Because they're out of space too, right? Many of the municipalities are out of space. So is there some opportunity to share in costs? Thank you.
Member Farrant.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Rory. Awesome presentation. Just a couple quick questions. As far as funding from the state, I know we get funding per student and such, but is there funding from the state to help when we need to build a new school?
We have not. We have not received funding for a new school, and I could ask the budget folks to tell us how long it's been, but it hasn't been recent that we have received any funding at all for our new schools. Our new schools are funded by impact fee, and we have had to augment that by impact fee, and we've also augmented that with property tax revenues and sales tax.
Okay, so when we need a new school, for instance, like Nona is, the high school is bursting out at the seams, double the capacity that it's supposed to be. And when we need that new school, all the funding for that, to create that new school comes from?
From Orange County residents through either impact fee, sales tax, or property. Property
Okay,
tax.
so I do think that
the
is something.
impact fee obviously is coming from the developers, but it gets translated to the residents in the price of the purchase of their home. So.
I do think it would be nice to advocate at the state level to see if there's a way for them to even help with half or something where it offsets the cost for us, so that the burden isn't solely on those impact fees and such. The other question would be, are there ways, and maybe this isn't directly for you, but just for us as a board, but are there ways that we can raise money or bring income in and not just, I feel like we're always taking, and trying to be more innovative and think of ways where we can, be maybe the Wekiva students that do culinary, is there a way for them to have their own little bakery shop that the residents around there come and they purchase, and it's generating some sort of income. I don't know if there's a way to do that or if that's something that we are allowed to do. I do feel like charter schools, some of the charter schools I've been to have been very creative with their funding to try to, bring that their finances up. So I don't know if there's.
I mean, Dr. Armbruster may be able to elaborate, but I know, for instance, the Wekiva Culinary being an example, they do generate some funds that help support that program. So there is some of that going on. I'm sure that there's opportunity to expand it, but we do have those examples in the district.
Dr.
And
Armbruster.
Mr. Salamine is correct. For example, Wekiva does do those things, and it is allowed, but those dollars go back to fund the program, not to build the facility. Now, it may help provide some of the things for the facility, but it's not designed to build the facility.
Got it. Okay. Well, maybe that's another thing that we could sort of brainstorm and try to think of, and not necessarily with our students and whatnot. That was just a quick thing. But other ways that we can make investments or make different, be creative with the funding that we get so that the money can multiply a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Ferrant. A couple of comments. Member Ferrant, let me respond to your question about being creative. Prior to you being on the board, we had some legislation that was passed that took away, I don't want to say creative, but one of the tools that we used here in Orange County. When I ran for office originally, one of my primary reasons was overcrowded schools. And people might say, why didn't you run for the school board? I didn't run for the school board because the school board couldn't do anything about it. The county was approving all the development, but there wasn't enough revenue coming from that new development to pay for the schools. So we got on the charter, a charter amendment that required the county and all the cities to consult with the school district before approving residential development to determine whether or not there was enough capacity. The school district didn't have the authority to stop the development, but the county and the cities were required at least to have that information and to make that publicly available. As a result of that, agreements were reached between the school district and the county with the development community at the table to find a mechanism so that developers that might be stopped because there wasn't enough capacity would have a means to help fund additional capacity. And that brought in significant revenue and created this partnership, collaboration of information that was hugely beneficial. I think it was my first year in office. Yeah, it was 2019. A bill passed that essentially took away that tool. What it did was require that any additional revenue that any developer provided, we would have to give them, say they gave us $1 million. When their impact fees were due, we had to decrease the impact fees by $1 million. So the net effect was we didn't get any additional revenue. We might have gotten it a little earlier, but we didn't get any additional revenue. And since impact fees pay for, what was it, 80%?
It's, yeah, it was
88%?
something over 80%.
Yeah. Of our revenues, we heavily rely on that. So that's one of the areas that has been really detrimental. And I would say that was kind of a creative tool that we used. Another thing that happened, and Mr. Salamine, you referenced it, but not in detail. So it was during the recession, and the legislature reduced our capital millage. Can you speak to that for a minute, just for the benefit of, well, yeah, it's not just you, but any new board members, but you're the only one that's here, I think.
So when
Okay.
I
And for the public,
when I
yes.
first started in public school construction business in the early 2000s, the property tax millage allocation was $2 million. And then in response to the recession, I believe, given the number and the amount of fixed income folks that the state of Florida has, the legislature, I believe it was over 2 successive years, reduced that by $250,000. So eventually it went to $1.5 million, which was 75% of what it was before. This also happened at the same time that property tax values decreased by 40% or so. In Hillsborough in 2016, from the property tax millage, we weren't getting what we were getting pre-recession in actual dollars. Because of the combination of those two effects. And as I indicated earlier, the $1.5 million level, I don't believe is sufficient to sustain the kind of facilities that we need to support the needs of our students.
One of the ideas that we've discussed and tried to advocate for in the past was if we could get back to that 2 mills, and even if that was just approved for counties that have a growth of X percent, because Orange County and several other counties that have high growth are experiencing much greater challenges than already built out counties. And so that would be one tool that would help. It's not everything that we need, but it would be a step in the right direction. Also, I wanted to piggyback on Member Gould's comment about equity and the fact that districts like ours that have been able to pass the sales tax have an advantage, if you will, to some of the other districts that don't have that community support. And, as you talked about equity, it's actually not just an issue of fairness. It's a constitutional issue, because part of the Florida Constitution is that we have to have equal and uniform education facilities across the state. It's one of the reasons that the state does their adjustment for how much we have to roll back our millage, to make sure that a county that has higher property values doesn't have an advantage over what's called a land poor county. We're somewhere in the middle. But given the fact that that equalization is so important, the equalization isn't taking place, as you point out, where you have a district that hasn't been able to have that. So in some ways we have an advantage because our citizens have supported us. In other ways we're disadvantaged because we have higher growth. But altogether, I think what it spells out is we need the state to fully fund the capital so that it's not kind of a hodgepodge across the state. So anyway, I just wanted to agree with you on that. One of the comments that Mr. Salamine made, and I want to make sure the public, you mentioned that that our smaller schools, building smaller schools, is a money loser. That was the term. So I just want to make sure the public understands. We're not making money off of our schools, but we get funding per student allocation. And if we have enough students in the school, we can operate it more efficiently. If we have smaller schools, we still need the same overhead. We still need a cafeteria. We still need all these facilities. And we still need a principal, and we need a vice principal, and we need a media specialist. We need all these people. But if we have a school that's only half as large as another school, then the money that we're getting per student isn't enough for us to operate that school without a loss. And so that's where the money loser comes in. Not to say that we make money off of our schools, but when we lose money, we literally do not have enough funding from the state to operate that school. That means we have to take money from another school. And so it forces us to build certain size schools. I also wanted to just chime in and agree with you. I think a lot of people don't realize that the cost of going up is a lot more expensive. There's a point where I guess you get enough density if you keep going, but there's that break-even point, and it's not when you get to 3 stories or 4 stories. So I think that was, and the other thing I do have concerns about from a safety standpoint, I was concerned about this as a private citizen when we started talking about joint use of playgrounds. I was concerned about it back in 1998, I think, when we first started this, and that was before we had the kinds of just horrible incidences that we've had at schools across the nation and here in the state of Florida. And I think that the protection of our facilities and guarding against what somebody might bring onto a campus when they're allowed to utilize a campus just scares me more than it ever has. So if we do have joint use facilities, I think we're going to have to find some ironclad way of making sure that some person doesn't use that to bring harm to our students. With that, let me turn to Member Felder.
Thank you, Chair Jacobs. Thank you, Mrs. Salabini. Happy New Year to you. Thank you for your report. Many of the things that board members have said, I did have some, and I do have concerns. Specifically in my district, District 5, it is growing at alarming rates with the schools, and there's little or no room to build another school. So one of the options in talking with the superintendent that we may have to go up. The other thing is that I appreciate the work effort from the district and facilities that we're trying to revamp or at least renovate some of my schools, especially Dr. Phillips. When it was first built, it had a capacity almost of 4,000 plus students. We have other schools like Olympia and Windermere was able to offset that. So the school is not as large as it was in the earlier years. And then I look at Oak Ridge. Has expanded, and the effort you have with the facilities department to get rid of some of those trailers, like things to at the school. Then I look at Jones. It is growing at alarming rates, and we're looking at the property. There's not a lot, but I do know that you are facilities. When I met with you, there is in the works another classroom building that you're doing for Jones, but it's still, again, it's the chair mentioned about going up because there's no room, and I so appreciate the public. As long as I can remember, even before I was on the board and I was a teacher, I was very appreciative of the penny sales tax. First, I didn't really understand it, but I understood it as I taught longer that we really need that. And our community has always supported us, and I'm so grateful for that. I'm just wondering if maybe even the business people, because we have a lot of businesses coming in. Everybody wants to live in Orlando. Everybody wants this area to support, especially if we're not getting the needed revenue from the state. Because this city, I think Pam Gould mentioned some months ago about how many families move into Orlando a week. So when families move in, neighborhoods have to be built, schools have to be built. And when I met with you, I shuddered as the chairman did. We looked at the statistics, the stats, in terms of the monies that we need. So I'm hoping even as this forum is open, that people are listening. I think if we really do an effort, board members, to make sure our community, they really understand what we are up against, what we are really dealing with as it relates to needing funds, having the funds, and how we utilize them to make sure our children are in schools that are comparable for them to advance them. So my concern has always been with making sure that we had the capacity, and I talked to you, and then I'm hearing the report again. It is a struggle. I support our schools that do have programs, as Member Farrant mentioned about Wakaiva, but that helps us because they can pour that back into their schools. However, on a whole, we do need we need more money. We always do, and we need more understanding from the state level to help us, because Orlando, I believe, and I know that I'm right, it is the fastest growing city in the country, I believe. I know in the state. So I appreciate the effort, and I'm hoping that those persons that are listening, that they understand our plight and support us, and we do need the tax dollars to help us. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Felder. Thank you, Member Felder. I'm going to call on Vice Chair Gallo in just a minute, and after that, I'm going to call on Member Byrd, who's on the line, just in case she has any comments or questions at this time. Vice Chair Gallo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a question regarding the schools. I know that due to the decline in enrollment, that we have probably some facilities, some schools that we're going to need to look at in the future, that we either may need to close or we may need to look at rezoning. Is that a discussion that we're having now? Is that a discussion for the future? Or is that a discussion that we need to have in enrollment as we look to the future on how we're going to fund these facilities?
So we do monitor where we are with all of our schools. I do agree that it's a discussion that we need to have. We aren't currently discussing particular schools, but we also see that some of the schools continue to decline. So it is a conversation that we'll definitely need to have going forward.
Vice Chair Gallo?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that. I know that as we look forward to go to the voters to request the half penny sales tax, it's so important to maintain our facilities, that we also need to make sure that we're doing due diligence and how we spend our money. And we are looking at those facilities that we may need to be creative, as Member Gould mentioned, on how we use them so that we can maximize the dollars that we have. Thank you so much.
Vice Chair, thank you. Absolutely. A very good observation. Let's see if Member Byrd has any comments or questions.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. No, there was a great presentation, Rory. As Chair said, as disheartening as it is, of course, it's important information to know. And I think it's particularly important considering that the legislative session starts today. And I know several of us board members are heading to Tallahassee next week. I am I would think that this would definitely be an issue that we need to discuss with our legislators. I think this would be a good opportunity for us to be able to share these concerns. And, you know, I think the conversation around high growth areas like ours and the need that we have compared to other districts is just so immense, as we've already mentioned. It's unlike what any other school district faces. So I think the discussion around increasing to the 2 mil is a good discussion to have. I think that the discussion around school safety and portables is another strong point that we should be able to make, as we can see from our decrease in the portables. While we are doing a tremendous job, there's still a huge number of portables in this county. And I know that the state is always talking about school safety and the need to keep our kids safe. And I know that getting kids out of portables and into permanent buildings is, of course, one of those concerns. But you know, as we know, we deal with it all the time. It's not something that we are able to do in every area, especially when we are just faced with so much growth. So I think that those two things are things that my fellow board members and I can discuss with our legislators as we go up there next week. I think this is a good time to address it. So I'm hopeful we can maybe see if we can get some change going. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Byrd. I have, I'm thinking about Member Gould's comment and Member Gallo's comment, and I'm wondering, for some of our schools that have extra capacity, especially elementary schools, which I haven't looked at the capacity numbers. I'm assuming that we have elementary schools that have excess capacity. Have we ever considered offering space to preschools? So I was thinking, if I'm a preschool operator already, and maybe I'm renting space, but could take a wing or a section of an elementary school, that we would be utilizing the capacity, generating some revenue, potentially saving, it might be a win-win, saving the preschool some revenue, put it out as an RFP or RFP, whatever that would be. And the whole security issue, I don't think really is an issue, because if I'm operating a preschool, I'm going to want the same level of security anyway. So let me recognize Member Gould.
I think that's exactly if we're not going to have just separate facility, or maybe it's a combination of both. I love that. It would also probably make that VPK preschool a little more accessible for people, too, especially in high need areas. No room in my side of town, but for that. But I think where there are opportunities, I think that completely aligns with our mission. It makes sense. We are desperate to try to get more and more kids into preschool VPK programs, to have them kindergarten ready. So I love that idea. And I think we could take a look at that. And maybe I know we don't like the portables, but that may even be an appropriate use in some places where we know we don't have enough. And there's all kinds of studies that have been done with the Early Learning Coalition and some independent groups out of the Central Florida Foundation on access to that VPK and preschool areas. And there's deserts out there, just like there are food deserts and medical deserts.
Exactly. And my recollection of where we have excess capacity might very well align with areas where we would greatly benefit the broader community by making preschool, pre-K more available, and preschool in general. Let me give Mr. Salabine an opportunity to respond, and then I'll go to Member Ferrand, if you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, those are all good ideas that we can certainly evaluate how we can, as we get into this evaluation of the excess capacity that we have in certain schools, those are certainly ideas that we can consider as we work through that process.
Thank you. Member Ferrand.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was trying to come at, is that how can we think creatively to generate some income, having pre-K centers. I know we do have some facilities. A question would be like Fort Gatlin. I know I've asked about that one. I think that's what it's called, right? The one in my district.
Yes, so Fort Gatlin, very quickly, that's actually a facility that we don't own. Mm-hmm. We're really trying to return it to the lessor, which is the federal government. So that's what we're trying to do at this point in time. But
do we still have to pay for different things with that? Or
we just have to maintain it. So our current issue right now is just the maintenance cost and the security costs associated with the facility.
Okay, so
it's also
so if we don't own
it's
that,
not configured for students in its current. It would require significant upgrades to that facility to be able to put any kind of student in it. We've used it for ancillary functions in the past, but we've relocated those functions really because of the condition of the facility, and now we're in the process of returning it.
Okay. The other one would be for some of the facilities that we own that are just sitting. I know some of them we're switching up, but for instance, the Pine Castle, I know we're looking at that, the pre-K, if that's even a need. But are there different facilities or land that we may own that we could create housing, for instance, and the rental for the housing would generate income for the schools? Those are the types of things that I'm thinking, how can we work creatively? The housing, I know we've talked about that before, where we would offer it to teachers, things like that. But somehow generating income, because right now I feel like we spend a lot and we don't generate. And I get that we're schools, but if there's a way we could work creatively.
Yes, we've had some initial conversations about partnering with an entity that could provide housing that would help support, obviously, our staff. And so those are things that we are looking into currently.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
All right, if there aren't any further comments from the board, I'll turn the floor back over to Dr. Armbruster. If there's any further business to come before the board?
Okay.
All right, with that?
No further business.
No further business. All right, with this, it's exactly 11:01, a 1-hour work session. Great job. Great job on the presentation. Very, very helpful. And thank you for including the comments in there as well. For those of us who are visual learners, that was helpful to me. Thank you. All right, meeting adjourned.